Folks, welcome back to The Cut. This is the final segment of this week's show, and joining myself along with Will Lyles and Richard Walker, who from HMW have been along with me all through the night, is my man Nate Griffin, Rice Athletics. That's the voice of Rice football right there. And we appreciate you coming in and hang out with us for this final segment.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, you know it's all good, man. We love to have you in studio. Needed that extra guy here, that extra voice, because we're going to finish off the show this week, talk a little bit about the NFC and AFC championship games. Obviously, the 49ers took care of business against Atlanta, and the Ravens got it done over those pesky Patriots who the Texans couldn't handle. But somehow the Ravens made it look not quite so difficult to figure out what was going on with Bill Belichick and that offense and that Patriot defense. And we'll go ahead, guys, and start with the 49ers and the Falcons. I'll give each one of you guys to just kind of give me your individual synopsis on how you think things played out and why they played out the way they did. Again, 49ers 28, Falcons 24. 49ers scored 17 unanswered points before, I'm sorry, the Atlanta scored 17 unanswered points before the 49ers were able to put 14 points on the board in the second quarter. And I'll tell you what I was thinking at that time. I was thinking to myself, this just doesn't feel like a game that I think Atlanta is going to come out on top in, because this game was starting to take on the profile. If Atlanta had to write or design a profile that they didn't want that game to fall into, we saw it happening when the 49ers came storming back with 14 unanswered points. Well, then Atlanta puts another score on the board, and now you go to halftime, 24-14, and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe the moment may be a little bit too big for this kid Kaepernick. Boy, was I wrong. Let's go ahead and start with Will.
Well, the 49ers, they were extremely poised throughout the whole game, even after Julio Jones caught the long touchdown on the broken coverage.
Right.
The defense still played solid. They stood up. They played better against the run. They set that game was just like the Seattle game. It was a mirror image of the Seattle game. And I saw it and I said, you know what? These guys, when they came storming back with the 14 points, I said they're going to win this game.
Yeah, I sent you a tweet when I saw LaMichael James get that 15-yard touchdown run, because I know that's a kid that you worked a lot with, and I know you had to be proud. Nate, your thoughts?
I think Mike Nolan made some adjustments in the second half to adjust to what Atlanta did in the first half, and we did see a carbon copy of the Seattle game. There's no question about that. Atlanta has had some problems against very stout and physical defenses, particularly in the second half, and it did not fare well for them on Sunday. So that's the way the ball rolls. If you can't score against a defense like that in the second half of the football game, 9 times out of 10, you're going to lose. And
I saw some folks on Twitter and about commenting that, Matty Ice is suddenly taking a page out of Matt Sharp's book. In your opinion, was this a Matty Ice problem, or were they just beaten by a better team?
I think they were beaten by a better team. San Francisco is a very physical team, just like Seattle. We saw the same thing. Seattle has much more physical corners, bigger corners. San Francisco, when you look at their linebackers, they look like guys who were made by God. And there's no question about that. They're just plastered together in all the right places. You look at those guys, you get intimidated. And I think in the second half, they really started to play well, especially after the adjustments that Mike Nolan made. Real
good situation, folks, going into this Super Bowl. You get a changing of the guard as far as the NFL's elite Mike linebacker, with Ray Lewis kind of handing over the torch to Willis. And I'm interested, that's kind of a side story along with the Harbaugh Bowl, two brothers coaching against each other. But for me, when you're talking about X and O football on the field, Richard, for me, it's all about these two linebackers, the present, the future, and the past, on display with these guys. Your thoughts?
Well, I think to your point, obviously the adjustments they made defensively had a significant impact. But my game ball would actually go to that offensive line. But they won the battle at the line of scrimmage, and they really took over this game starting somewhere toward the middle of the second quarter. That second half, they absolutely dominated at the line of scrimmage. The defensive line for Atlanta just couldn't get any type of pressure on Kaepernick whatsoever. They had no response to his arm, which surprised me more so than his leg. I mean, this guy he looked like looked like a kind of Joe Montana-ish, so to speak, out there. So
with the poise.
with the poise,
Yeah.
I mean, he had no pressure. He could have sat back in a lazy boy and picked the defense apart.
Yeah, interesting that you talk about that offensive line because the 49ers, they may have the best offensive line in football. It's easy to say that when you see teams on the highest stage and want to grade where they're the best at this and the best at that. No, San Francisco really does have a dominating, and they're a big
They're
physical
huge.
line. They've only got one guy that's in the 300-pound range. All the rest of those guys are notably over 300 pounds. I believe one guy maybe 335 or so. Yeah. So they lay on you, and what I noticed is that, and tell me what you think, Nate, Atlanta's front line, and tell me how this may relate against Baltimore with that 3-4 scheme. Atlanta had a lot of trouble shedding blockers at the first level. And I'm sorry, if you're going to allow Gore to get behind that big offensive line, especially going up against a 3-4 defense, and you can't shed blockers and be able to compromise those gaps, it's going to be some issues for you.
Haloti Nada in the middle is a load. And, I tell you what, they have two really good defensive ends as well. But what that does, that allows those linebackers to make plays. I think Ray Lewis is going to have a big day if they run his way.
14 tackles, 6 solo tackles.
There you go. That's what the 3-4 defense is supposed to do. It's supposed to get those linebackers in positions to make plays. But I tell you what, the key is going to be how well the big guy in the middle plays, Haloti Nada.
When you have a big guy like Haloti Nada laying on your center and dominating the A-gap, and then when he goes out and take a breather and you bring in Terrence Cody, wow. that's a lot of football player. Yeah. Let's move on to the Ravens and Patriots. I want to pat myself on the back on this one. I felt all along, I told folks, what's going to really make people in Houston feel bad about the Texans when the Patriots beat up on them, and they did that, is that this is not a great Patriot football team. And you're going to feel foolish when you're sitting home and you watch other teams, probably the Ravens was the team I said. I just didn't buy Denver. I figured that Peyton Manning would find a way not to win. But I just know that this particular Patriot team was not a great football team. Belichick is an awesome coach. Awesome coach. And if you get Kubiak in the Texans and you're sitting home right now, well, you are sitting home right now, and you watch how, it's not the fact that the Ravens found a way to beat New England in New England, it's how easy they made it look. The Texans couldn't figure out where to line up early in the football game. If you notice on defense, the Ravens didn't move around a lot. They got set, and they said, here we come. Deal with it. Now, with that philosophy of football will work against a system that's got a kid at 6'5" that can run a 4.3. That was his fastest time he's ever been timed in Kaepernick.
Well, I think one of the things that will hurt the Ravens is that they won't be able to play as much man against Kaepernick because they're going to try to spy him. They're going to have to spy him.
Just like Atlanta did. Yeah.
Just like Atlanta did. So what that did was that took another person out of that zone, which you spy on Kaepernick, and he picked them apart.
No doubt.
He picked them apart. So I feel that threat to run is going to be a very dominating factor in the game because he can beat you not only with his legs, but he can beat you with his arm.
But you look at the Baltimore-New England time of possession, 31 minutes as opposed to 28, 54, almost 29 minutes. The 49ers were able to dominate at the line of scrimmage against Atlanta, but they lost the time of possession battle. I think because of these two teams are so physical and they both like to play between the tackles on offense and take their chances downfield, they both would do that. And, of course, the 49ers will have that extra added punch of Kaepernick and what he can do on the ground. But how important, Nate, do you think time of possession in this particular matchup will be in the Super Bowl?
Well, let's not discount the fact that they have two great running backs in Frank Gore and LaMichael James. LaMichael James, again, the change of pace running back. Frank Gore is your in-between-the-tackle guy. He's your gap guy when you need that extra 1 or 2 yards, the really tough yards. That's what you get from him. And you talked about the big offensive line that leaned on Atlanta. That was a problem for them. I think that's going to be a problem for Baltimore as well. But, again, I think that they match up a little bit better than a team like Atlanta because they're lighter up front. And then you talked about bringing in big Terrence Cody out of Alabama. That's going to be a big factor for the Baltimore Ravens. So look for them to do that. But the change of pace back in LaMichael James, 2 questions. Is he going to be able to really skirt outside, because Baltimore they can cover those edges. They do a good job of edge penetration. They can do that very, very well. So that's going to be a big question for them, as well as will they be able to run against Baltimore?
Yeah, Ravens are super athletic. When you got just ageless performance with Ray Lewis, and then a guy like Suggs that's just so dynamic. Excuse me. We're going to close it out right here. And Richard, I'll give you like about 30 seconds to tell me what the X factor is in this matchup with the 49ers and the Ravens, two very similar teams in regard to their physicality.
I think the X factor for this game is going to be how the secondary responds to both of these respective quarterbacks. For the 49ers, it's going to be interesting to see how well they match up with those huge receivers that the Ravens have. And Joe Flacco he doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but the guy has no problem with getting the ball down the field. So it'd be interesting to see, how effective he is at stretching the field, which obviously will take pressure off him and create some problems with those matchups if they can. On the other hand, I want to see how well the defensive backfield of the Ravens does in disguising coverage with Colin Kaepernick. Because kind of to Will's point earlier, you're not going to be able to run a whole lot of man, so you got to be creative with your coverages and try to confuse the kid. I think that's the only way that you can stop him. I don't think you can plan on using your physicality to try to slow him down, because he can just always tuck the ball and run. But you try to confuse him, try to get him to make some mistakes, put him in a situation where he's behind on the scoreboard and you limit their playbook. I think that's the best way to game plan for a guy like